This is Ellen Donnelly,
and Mark Maxey.
and we are Field Day. This project, Do Not Disturb Occupants, emerged from our response to a call for the LA Times 10 exhibition sponsored by UCLA's City Lab. At the time, we were a Los Angeles-based design practice, and that call sought tactical design ideas emanating from Los Angeles that might be expected to proliferate constructively in the near future. Times 10 implies that certain architectural ideas are intended to multiply, creating intrinsically urban projects for the coming decade. It also reflects the notion that works of architecture hold potential that can be orders of magnitude greater than an individual building. Such radical, reproductive increments, that is, when architecture goes urban, suggests that architecture is not about utopian vision or the building, per se, but its generative capacity.
Flying into LAX, one can't help but see that LA is a city of houses. By no mistake, the most significant milestone in the history of United States housing is the creation of the 30-year mortgage, which functions as the primary tool for widespread homeownership in America. This financial instrument has implicit spatial consequences by dictating programmatic, material, and cultural definitions of domesticity. Researching the history of housing provides evidence for how we got where we are today. Los Angeles is not a haphazard confluence of urbanism, but a very real blueprint of government-subsidized mortgages and discriminatory redlining practices writ large in a mass housing market. It is through this lens, the politics of ownership, finance, and governance, that we examine urban conditions as they are and speculate on what they may be by reframing methodologies of owning, financing, and governing property and buildings.
The premise underlying our research is that the protocols for producing architecture, such as zoning ordinances, deed covenants, and mortgage financing, actively but invisibly dictate the architectural object. We are particularly interested in literally reading between the lines to find potentials in zoning ordinances and in writing between the lines to manipulate deed covenants to effect long-term change. Through careful acts of manipulation, the spatial DNA of the city, while seemingly fixed, becomes incredibly precarious. Do Not Disturb Occupants approaches architectural outcomes in Los Angeles through the manipulation of property ownership, policy loopholes, tax dodges, political coups, and collective development strategies. Our goal is to remove housing from the speculative market so that its value is rooted in design quality, material performance, use value, and economic durability. We also want to remove housing from the speculative market as a means to reimagine what ownership means and to address the fundamental question, is housing a right? And should housing be a profitable enterprise in the same way that we can ask the same question about health care?
Our project focuses on three key points: that the immaterial dictates the material, property ownership is a critical component in the production and use of space, and that architectural experimentation is tactically achieved through the manipulation of external constraints. By focusing on the real estate market in Los Angeles, a region with one of the highest value real estate markets in the country, we kept returning to the impact of rampant real estate speculation. This, coupled with the reality that many Los Angeles municipalities and their neighborhoods have historically high ratios of rental property to owner-occupied houses, which has created a widening gap between rich and poor. By proposing alternative methodologies for financing and owning architecture, this project reimagines single neighborhoods, block by block, as repeatable micro-cities that redefine the role of citizenship, community, domesticity, and the economics of housing through material and performance in urban space.
A confluence of historic and financial circumstances in Santa Monica's Ocean Park neighborhood make it ripe for reconsidering its ownership structures, land use, and zoning as a prototype for urban reinvention. To give additional context to this neighborhood, Ocean Park is located in the southwest corner of Santa Monica. It is bound by the Pacific Ocean on the west and Lincoln Boulevard to the east, and between Pico Boulevard to the north and Santa Monica city limit to the south. The neighborhood has a large tract of state-owned land, which includes the beach and parking lots and small parcels of city-owned land. And it also has a vibrant commercial corridor with restaurants and boutiques. It is a mix of historic craftsman bungalows, small freestanding single-family houses and duplexes, large post-war apartment buildings, as well as several large houses and condos. Over 70% of Santa Monica households are rentals. In 1978, California voters passed Proposition 13, reducing property owners' taxes by as much as 57% and drastically limiting future increases. Less than a year later, Santa Monica voters amended their charter to pass one of the strictest rent control laws in the country. These laws provide incredible protections for tenants, while simultaneously disincentivize investment and maintenance by landlords. Because of the rent control laws, landlords have unsaleable properties because rental income does not cover the purchase price, while renters are protected from eviction. This leads to a cycle where landlords defer maintenance, and in some cases, tenants spend their own money to improve the landlord's property. Again, we ask, is housing a right? And is it a private landlord's responsibility to provide affordable housing or the government's? Given our deeply entrenched neoliberal system, is there another way?
Returning to our case study in Santa Monica, both laws, Proposition 13 and rent control, were overwhelmingly successful and have utterly failed. Today there are owners of multi-million-dollar properties who pay $1,000 a year in property taxes, while a new home buyer can expect to pay 10 to 15 times as much. There are longtime renters paying $650 per month for a bungalow with an ocean view, while the market rate of their unit is nearly $4,000 per month. While property values continue to skyrocket, massive discrepancies exist between market rate rents and property taxation. It is in this space that new opportunities for architectural intervention and policy overhaul exist. In this design project, we are proposing the implementation of a nonprofit land trust hybridized with a low-profit limited liability company, also known as an L3C. Longtime owners wishing to liquidate properties encumbered by rent control are financially incentivized to sell their buildings to the L3C and donate their land to the trust as a tax write-off against massive capital gains.
Decoupling ownership of buildings from land creates permanent affordability by removing real estate from the speculative market. The land trust can begin to combine lots and erase property lines to assemble larger tracts of land for the LC3 to develop as part of its socially driven mission of providing high-quality design and affordable housing. In opposition to deed restrictions of the past century, we envision covenants that forefront affordability, common use, universal access, and architectural design. We understand zoning, with its setbacks, height restrictions, and density limitations as malleable variables that may change as ownership is restructured.
The Land Trust provides a mean to share equity, share resources, and collectively develop real estate projects. Because the trust owns the land, the space between buildings, from the streets to the yards, can be developed. Land Trust members can either rent their home or purchase it through equity shares in the L3C. The previous ideology of homeownership, a burden only justified by rising real estate prices, is replaced with a sustainable approach to building wealth through a community-led, design-driven lifestyle where best use rather than highest use governs development. Using this alternative model of residential development, streets will also be reconsidered as community assets and their use redefined. As cities become less reliant on the automobile through increased mass transit, cycling, car sharing, and driverless technologies, many residential streets function as mere parking lots. With municipal support from the city, the street grid can be reimagined as a building site that encourages incremental development at different scales to enhance the quality of urban experience.
Our proposal has two distinct interventions. One that occupies the space between buildings, which is the space rendered in gray. The second proposal occupies a non-through street. Both interventions deliver high-density, highly designed housing options for a mix of end users. These proposals reconsider domestic space and propose alternative approaches to typical housing. In one example, we have proposed an SRO stack, a 4-story building with 8 interlocking single-room occupancy units. These units provide a minimum in terms of interior space, but they do provide private sleeping and bathing arrangements. Shared amenities include a communal kitchen, outdoor spaces, and storage. Similar to the beloved walk streets of Los Angeles' Venice neighborhood, Our proposal creates urban communities privileging the pedestrian over the driver without giving up the necessity of using a car in LA. As designers, we recognize that car ownership and its use will be disrupted in the coming years. It is our position that cities are sites of constant change, and policy must be revisited and reconsidered as economic, cultural, and social situations shift. Do Not Disturb Occupants offers a radical new chapter in the city's history where economic necessity meets the uncanny and all the neighbors are on board.